My name is Bella, and I'm 67 years old. I've been many things in my life: wife, widow, teacher, friend. But above all, I've been a mother. A mother who gave everything. And tonight was supposed to be a celebration of that legacy, of family, of new life. Instead, I was humiliated. The party had been my idea, a celebration in honor of my son Max and his wife Victoria's first child, my first grandchild. The thought of a baby in the house again had filled me with a strange joy, the kind of joy that made my hands itch to knit tiny booties and dig up Max's old storybooks from the attic. I spent weeks preparing for the evening. The garden had been trimmed, fresh flowers arranged in every room, and the dining table, my mother's oak table, polished to a shine, was set with my finest porcelain. I made Max's favorite lasagna and even baked Victoria's preferred dessert, lemon tart with lavender whipped cream. It was a small gathering, just family and a few close friends, but to me, it meant everything. The house looked beautiful, warm, and golden in the soft light. I wore a new silk blouse in burgundy with a string of pearls Max had given me for my 60th. I even curled my hair. As I looked in the mirror before guests arrived, I whispered to my reflection, "You did well, Bella." Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. Victoria was glowing when she arrived. That's the word people use, isn't it? Glowing. Her long hair was curled in loose waves, her designer maternity dress perfectly fitted. She swept into the house like a celebrity, thanking me with air kisses and a carefully rehearsed smile. Max followed behind, tall and handsome in the way his father used to be, his arm around her waist. We mingled. We dined. People toasted the couple, offered baby name suggestions, and shared parenting advice. Max held Victoria's hand tightly, beaming with pride every time she mentioned the baby. And I, foolish, devoted me, hovered in the background, quietly refilling drinks, clearing plates, making sure the evening flowed. Then, the moment came. Victoria tapped her glass with a silver fork. The room hushed. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice light and sparkling like the champagne she wasn't drinking. "We're so grateful to all of you for being here tonight. This baby is already so loved. Max and I feel incredibly blessed." She turned toward me, smiling that same smile she uses when she asks for favors she doesn't intend to return. "And thank you, Bella," she said sweetly, "for hosting, for everything you've done. It's so thoughtful of you to help us prepare for the baby's arrival. Really." I nodded graciously. The crowd murmured in approval. "And," she continued, pausing for effect, "we're especially excited because soon, once the old hag moves into a nursing home, we'll finally be able to turn her room into a proper nursery." There was silence, then laughter. Max's laugh came first. Loud, oblivious. "Oh my God, Victoria," he chuckled, nudging her arm. "You're terrible." Others joined in, though not everyone. Some chuckled uncomfortably. Some stared into their glasses. But no one said anything. No one looked at me. Except Victoria. She was already raising her glass, smiling like the queen of a cruel joke. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The blood drained from my face, and my hands clenched the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Did she just say that? Did she really call me an old hag? In my house? At my party? My son, my Max, laughed. He laughed. That was the part that broke me. I stood, murmuring something about checking the dessert, and slipped away into the kitchen. Behind the safety of the swinging door, I braced my arms on the counter and stared down at the lemon tart. Its delicate crust had cracked slightly while cooling. Just like me, I had sacrificed everything for Max. I raised him alone after his father died. Worked 2 jobs so he could go to college. I gave him this house when he was struggling after graduate school. I let him bring Victoria here, even when I suspected she didn't love him the way he loved her. I swallowed hard. The humiliation burned in my throat like bile. How long had I been just a joke to them? An obstacle? An old woman to be shoved aside? a room to be repurposed. I didn't return to the party. I stayed in the kitchen, slicing the tart with trembling hands, arranging it on a tray I never brought out. When the guests began to leave, I plastered a smile on and accepted their thanks with numb politeness. Max and Victoria lingered in the living room, laughing about something on their phones. I stood in the hallway, watching them through the slats of the staircase. My son didn't notice I was missing. He didn't come looking for me. Eventually, they retreated to the master suite I had once shared with my late husband. My room, now theirs. I sat alone in the dark dining room, surrounded by dirty dishes and empty wine glasses, and felt the weight of every decision I'd made for the past 30 years pressed down on my chest. They wanted me gone. Well, maybe they'd get their wish, but not before I found out exactly what Victoria was hiding, because something wasn't right. I had noticed the way she avoided certain questions, the sudden change in her doctor appointments, the way she'd snapped at Max last week when he asked about prenatal vitamins, and the strange phone call I'd overheard. Her voice sharp, hushed, saying, "No, he doesn't know. I'll handle it." I used to trust my instincts. Tonight reminded me why I should again. They think I'm old, weak, dispensable. They're wrong. Let them laugh now. Let them plan my exile. I'll let the truth do the talking soon enough. The morning after the party, I stood at the kitchen sink, the steam from my coffee curling into the chilled air, untouched. Outside, the garden sat cloaked in frost. Each flower bed, once lovingly tended, looked brittle and abandoned, like me. Max left early for work, as usual. Victoria lingered at the door, her robe hanging open just enough to feign affection. He kissed her cheek, and she giggled, calling him babe in that sugary voice she used only when she wanted something. But the second the door shut behind him, her face fell. She didn't hum her usual morning tune. She didn't waltz around the kitchen looking for her ridiculous kale smoothies. Instead, she padded straight back upstairs with her phone clutched tightly to her ear. "No, not now," I heard her say. "He's home all weekend. You'll have to wait." Her voice was clipped, cold, a tone I'd never heard her use. Not with Max, not even with me, and certainly not with someone she shouldn't have been talking to. That was the first crack in the glass. From that moment on, I started watching. Not in the overt way that gets you called paranoid or nosy. Number I became quiet, precise. I stopped giving her space. I stopped excusing myself from rooms. I let her know in subtle ways that I was present, that I was seeing her, and what I saw chilled me. Victoria lied, often and easily. She told Max she had a doctor's appointment one Wednesday, and when I offered to come, she declined, saying he'd insisted on taking her instead. That evening, Max came home holding takeout and looked surprised. "She said you took her." "She told me you did," I replied calmly, pouring tea into my favorite china cup. "How was the appointment?" He blinked, confused. "She went alone. I had a meeting." We said nothing more, but I watched the confusion plant itself in his mind like a seed. Another day, she left the house dressed in yoga pants and a tight top, claiming she was going to a prenatal Pilates class. I waited 15 minutes and followed. She didn't go to the studio. She walked past it, past the community center, past the bookstore where she liked to pretend she read. She walked 4 blocks west and ducked into a cafe I hadn't seen before, the Kingsley. I stood across the street pretending to read a bus schedule, my heart pounding like a schoolgirl's. Inside, at a back corner table, she met someone. A man. Tall, lean, a little too stylish for this part of town. His arm draped casually over the back of her chair. He leaned in too close. She smiled the smile she used to reserve for Max, head tilted, lashes lowered, lip caught between her teeth. I felt nauseated. They stayed for nearly an hour. I watched them leave through the back alley door, his hand on her lower back. She didn't notice me. I didn't try to be seen. I snapped one photo from across the street. The angle was bad, but it was them, her, and him. Later, when she came home, she told Max Pilates had been exhausting. So many stretches, she moaned. I feel like I'm training for the Olympics. He laughed, kissed her forehead. That same night, around 11 p.m., I heard her whispering in the upstairs hallway. I stepped out of the guest room and stood near the linen closet, just out of view. Johnny, she murmured, you need to calm down. I told you, not when he's home. Johnny, a name I didn't know, a name that suddenly made everything sharpen. I waited until she left the house 2 mornings later before entering their bedroom. My hands shook, but I told myself it wasn't snooping, it was survival. Inside her closet, behind a row of untouched designer shoes, was a white shoebox with a satin ribbon. Photos. I didn't expect photos. Some printed, some Polaroid, some with corners creased from being tucked into wallets or drawers. The man from the cafe. Johnny. Victoria draped across his lap, him kissing her neck, her laughing in the sun, barefoot on what looked like a beach. I flipped over one. Me and Johnny, Santa Cruz 2019. My heart dropped. She met Max in the spring of 2020. They were married by fall 2021. Yet here she was, still with Johnny during and even after that timeline. I kept flipping. There were photos from 2020, even one of her in what was clearly our backyard. She was pregnant. He was with her, arms wrapped around her belly. On the back, May 2023. I nearly dropped the stack. 7 months ago. She was already married to Max, already living under my roof, already calling me mom to my face. That night, I watched Max rub her belly as they lay on the couch. He was smiling, glowing with naive pride. He's going to be a soccer player, he said. I felt sick. This baby might not be his. This baby might be Johnny's. Everything clicked into place. The evasive phone calls, the contradictions, the sudden yoga and doctor visits that never aligned, the disappearing acts, the photo of Johnny's hand on her swollen stomach. I replaced everything in the box with careful hands, down to the crease in the ribbon. I returned to my room and sat in the dark, the photo of the cafe glowing on my phone screen. I was being erased, slowly, deliberately. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak, that I'd fade quietly into the background like wallpaper. But they were wrong. I was a mother before I was anything else, and mothers don't abandon their children. I made a plan that night. My friend Mary's daughter-in-law worked at a private paternity lab in town. I remembered the address from a Christmas card. Discreet, confidential, accurate within 48 hours. All I needed was something with Max's DNA, and something from the baby. That part would take time, but I had patience. Years of it, in fact. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just crack their little fantasy, it would shatter it. It started with a name, Johnny. But where a name begins, stories unravel, and secrets don't stay buried when someone like me starts digging. After what I found in Victoria's shoebox, those photos of her and Johnny, intimate, recent, and damning, I knew I couldn't walk this path alone. I needed someone smart, discreet, merciless, if it came to it. I called Cassie. She was the only person I trusted. We'd been friends for decades, through PTA meetings, carpool lines, funerals, and menopause. I knew she'd left teaching to become a private investigator, mostly because after her divorce, she wanted to stop asking questions politely and start demanding answers. She was ruthless in the way only women who've been lied to can be. We met at Rosewood Cafe, a quiet spot where secrets were safe and faces were familiar. I arrived first, choosing a booth at the back with a view of the entire room. My tea sat untouched in front of me, growing colder by the minute. Cassie swept in 20 minutes later, dressed in black with those cat-eye sunglasses she always wore when she was working. She took one look at me and said, "You've got that funeral face. Whose life just died?" I slid the photo across the table. the grainy picture I'd taken of Victoria and Johnny outside the Kingsley Cafe. Her name's Victoria. She's married to my son. Cassie didn't flinch. She picked up the photo, studied it. You want me to find out if she's cheating? No, I said quietly. I already know she is. I want to know everything else. She took a slow sip of her coffee and nodded. Then let's go hunting. 4 days later, Cassie showed up at my house with a manila folder tucked under her arm and eyes like a blade. She didn't speak until we were in the kitchen, the door locked, the kettle off. She's clever, Cassie began, but not clever enough. She opened the folder and began laying out evidence, piece by devastating piece. First, she has 2 phones, she said. One's registered to her name, the one Max probably knows about. The other's a prepaid, untraceable number bought 6 months ago. I got a ping on it. Guess who she's been texting? Johnny, I said, already knowing. Every day, sometimes twice a day. The messages we intercepted, thanks to a little clone software, aren't flirty. They're strategic. She handed me a printout. I scanned the messages, my blood turning to ice. Johnny. He'll never see it coming. Once the papers are signed, we're free. Victoria. He's too soft. He still buys me flowers. You should have seen the nursery. Johnny. Soon, babe. Just hang on. Once the baby's born, we disappear. Disappear. She was planning to vanish. With the baby. With Johnny. She sees him regularly, Cassie continued. Tuesdays and Fridays. Motel 9 off Darlington Highway. Always checks in separately. Always checks out within 2 hours. Photos followed, blurry, distant, but unmistakable. Her stepping out of his car, him holding her coat. A kiss exchanged behind the alley. Each one felt like a slap across the face. And there's more, Cassie said grimly. She's been to a custody attorney. She laid down a business card. Fletcher and Myers, family law. She's preparing to file. Probably wants full custody, no visitation. She's also been consulting on financial separation. I felt my stomach drop. Does Max know? Not a clue. He's still buying her prenatal tea and whispering to her belly like it's poetry, but she's emptying their joint account. She handed me a bank statement. Withdrawals in small, frequent chunks. $400 here, $600 there. Over $14,000 had been funneled out in the last 3 months. All to a second account. Guess who owns the destination account? Cassie asked. Johnny. Bingo. She gave me a look I'll never forget. Pity laced with anger. She's bleeding your son dry, Bella, and he's too in love, too trusting, too blind to see it. I pressed my hands against the cool countertop, the weight of the truth crashing down like a wave. She's going to leave him. After the baby is born, Cassie confirmed. And with your grandchild, if it even is your grandchild. I looked up. What do you mean? Cassie hesitated. I ran Johnny's name through the state family court system. Turns out he's already been involved in a paternity dispute before. 2017, a woman named Carla Renshaw sued him for child support. He denied the baby was his, claimed he'd had a vasectomy. But he lost. And Victoria? She visited the same attorney who handled Johnny's case. Same firm, same lawyer. Dear God. She knows how this works. She's done the math. My guess? She knows the baby isn't Max's. I sank into a chair, the floor tilting beneath me. All this time, Max had been reading baby name books, saving up for strollers, folding onesies, and she'd been building an escape route with another man, with money that wasn't hers, with a baby that might not even carry my son's blood. She doesn't just want to leave him, I whispered. She wants to erase him. Cassie reached across the table and placed a small envelope in my hand. What's this? A collection kit from my friend at a lab. We'll test the baby's DNA the moment we can get a sample. Quiet, clean, legal. I held the envelope like it might shatter. Do I tell Max? Not yet. Not until you're sure. When you have the truth, then you make them listen. We sat in silence for a long moment, the kettle still cold, the air thick with betrayal. Victoria thought she was clever. She thought no one was watching. She forgot who I am. I buried a husband. I raised a son. I survived widowhood and watched my hair turn silver without ever asking the world for thanks. But I don't fade. I fight. And now? Now I had ammunition. I decided to wait. Not because I had doubts, not because I lacked proof, but because when the time came to confront the truth, I wanted it to hit like thunder. Undeniable, irreversible. There would be no misunderstandings, no carefully crafted excuses, no sweet-talking her way out of it. A DNA test would be my gavel. But first, the child had to be born. So I waited. And while I waited, I watched. Victoria, ever the actress, flourished in her role. The house became her stage. She moved through each room with the air of ownership, rearranging furniture, discarding my linens, putting up wall decals of cartoon elephants and inspirational quotes in curling cursive letters. She erased my presence one curtain rod at a time. My mom always said a home should reflect the future, not the past, she said one day, while taping up an enormous vinyl decal above the crib that read, "You are our greatest adventure." Our? I whispered to myself, standing just out of sight in the hallway. The word rang like a lie in my ears. Max, of course, beamed. He stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, watching her every move like she was the sun and he the grateful earth. "She's amazing, isn't she?" he said to me one evening while stirring pasta sauce. "I never thought I could be this happy." I nodded and excused myself, my hands trembling as I set the table. Amazing. That's what he called the woman who used his money to book motel rooms under a fake name. The woman who whispered to Johnny in our garden when she thought I was asleep. Each day, she became more embedded in this life. Her claws sunk deeper. She stopped asking permission. She started acting like this house, my house, was hers by right. She ordered new drapes for the master bedroom and had the gall to send my old ones to Goodwill. She converted my sewing nook into her breastfeeding station, despite my protests. She moved boxes of baby clothes into the attic, discarding Max's childhood toys without a second glance. "These old things are dusty," she told him sweetly. "We want the baby to have fresh memories." Fresh memories. What she really meant was her memories, her version of their life, clean of anything that came before her. And the worst part? Max let her. He let her sweep away 30 years of my life like they were dust on the mantle. "She's just excited, Mom," he said when I dared raise a concern. "It's nesting, you know?" Number I didn't know. I knew betrayal. I knew lies. I knew theft when I saw it, even if my son couldn't. And so I said nothing more, because words wouldn't save him. But truth would. Victoria was careful, but not careful enough. I still saw the second phone tucked into the drawer behind her prenatal vitamins. I still overheard her whispering late at night in the laundry room when she thought everyone was asleep. I still noticed the receipts she left in her coat pocket, gas stations on the far side of town, charges at out-of-the-way cafes, one particularly interesting transaction from Cedar and Birch Legal Services, a family law office. She was building a future without Max, right under his nose. But she wasn't doing it quickly. She was waiting too, for the baby. It was all timed, all rehearsed, and that made it easier for me to play along. I folded baby clothes and smiled when she asked if I liked the nursery's woodland theme. I nodded politely when she showed me her hospital packing list. I even helped roll paint on the nursery walls, swallowing bile as she chatted about midwives and birth plans, like the life growing inside her hadn't been conceived in betrayal. But the entire time, I was preparing. I already had the testing kit Cassie gave me, a simple envelope tucked inside a box labeled stationary. All I needed was a cheek swab from the baby and something with Max's DNA. A toothbrush, a piece of floss, anything. I had the latter stored safely in my room already. Max's old razor, the one he forgot in the upstairs bathroom after a weekend trip. I'd sealed it in a plastic bag and labeled it with the date. Now I just needed the child. Each night, I lay awake listening to Max whisper lullabies through Victoria's swollen belly. I watched his heart pour into a child that might not be his. And each night, I whispered to myself, I will protect him, even if it means tearing his world apart, even if he never forgives me. Because what Victoria had done, what she was still doing, was more than infidelity. It was invasion. She had seduced my son, stolen his kindness, fed off his loyalty, and now she was preparing to walk away with the most sacred piece of him, his future. I wouldn't let her, no matter how many ultrasound photos she pinned to the fridge, no matter how many guests she invited over to see the nursery, no matter how often she called me mom, with a sickening smile on her lips. She was waiting for a clean exit, but I was waiting for something else. Justice. And when the baby was born, I'd get it. The child was born just after 4 in the afternoon on a biting February day, with snow pressed up against the hospital windows and wind howling like a warning down the corridor. Max called me the moment it happened. "It's a boy, Mom," he said breathlessly. "He's perfect." His voice cracked with joy. I could hear it through the phone, the trembling wonder of a man seeing his firstborn, the love swelling in his chest like a tide he couldn't contain. It nearly broke me, because I knew what he didn't. I raced to the hospital, the test kit burning a hole in my purse. I'd rehearsed it all in my mind. The moment I'd ask to hold him, the moment I'd gently press the lancet to his soft little heel, the moment I'd seal the blood sample that might confirm what I feared most. He was beautiful. The nurses had swaddled him in a pale blue blanket, and Victoria looked every bit the serene new mother, flushed cheeks, hair tucked back, her lips curled into a tired smile. But when I entered the room, her smile faltered. Not enough to notice, unless you knew what to look for, unless you knew her. Max looked up from where he sat at the edge of the bed, tears still in his eyes. "Come meet your grandson," he said, grinning. "Mom, he's everything." Everything. I stepped forward, and the weight of him settled into my arms like an anchor. So small, so warm, so unaware of the storm swirling around him. My throat closed as I whispered, "Hello, little one." Victoria watched me closely. I saw the flicker of nerves in her eyes. She knew this moment mattered. She knew what I was capable of now. I rocked him gently, cooing nonsense, buying time until the nurse left and Max stepped out for coffee. Then it was just her, me, and the child. She turned her face to the wall, pretending to sleep, but her body was too tense. I moved quickly. From my purse, I retrieved the lancet, sanitized, sterile, safe. I unwrapped the tiny gauze pad and readied the blood spot card. My fingers trembled as I pricked the soft pad of his heel. A thin dot of blood welled up. He whimpered, not a cry, just a sound of discomfort, and I pressed him gently to my chest as I collected the sample. I whispered apologies between each soft pat. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I just need to know. I need to protect your daddy." When the final droplet marked the card, I sealed it carefully in the specimen bag and returned it to my purse. The baby squirmed, and I swaddled him again, placing him beside Victoria's arm. She opened her eyes then, just a crack, just long enough to say, "You think you're so clever." I didn't answer, because I was clever. But I wasn't doing this to win. I was doing it to save Max from a lie so cruel it could fracture the rest of his life. That night, while Victoria slept and Max doted on her with an intensity that tore at my soul, I returned to the house with his overnight bag, at his request. "Just grab some clean shirts and my laptop, please. And the checkbook, we forgot it." In their bedroom, I found the laptop exactly where I remembered, still logged into his email, still carrying digital fingerprints that Victoria hadn't bothered to wipe. I was about to shut it down when I noticed a folder on the desktop labeled Legal Docs. Inside it, scanned neatly, was a contract. It bore Victoria's name and Johnny's. It was dated 3 days before the birth. It was a legal agreement drawn by a notary at Cedar and Birch Legal, the firm Cassie had already linked to Victoria's secret visits. The document read, "This agreement certifies that Jonathan Reed, biological father of the unborn male child carried by Victoria Andress Hargrove, does hereby waive all legal, custodial, and parental rights in perpetuity in exchange for the lump sum payment of $25,000, paid in full upon execution of this document. Said agreement is final and binding. The undersigned shall have no legal standing in any future matter involving the said child." It was signed by both parties, stamped, witnessed, final. I sat back, heart pounding. She had paid him off, paid him to vanish. She'd taken Max's money, stolen it over months, and given it to Johnny so he would disappear and let her pass this child off as Max's. She wasn't just deceptive, she was meticulous. She was criminal. And Max, he was pacing in a hospital room, probably writing a letter to the son he believed to be his. He had no idea. I packed the laptop, tucked the DNA sample deeper into my purse, and drove to Cassie's contact at the lab, dropping it off with shaking hands. 48 hours, the technician said gently. You'll have your results by Friday afternoon. 2 days. 2 days before my son's world changed. I drove home in silence, the hum of the car drowned by the roar of my thoughts. What would I do if the child wasn't his? How would I tell him? How would I not? By the time I walked through the front door, I felt like a ghost in my own home. Every object Victoria had moved, every photo she'd taken down, every heirloom she'd boxed up like it meant nothing. I stood in the hallway, clutching the doorknob, and made a vow. I would not let this lie live, not in my house, not on my son's soul. It came in the afternoon, quiet, unassuming, a white envelope with no return address, no warning, just my name. My hands trembled when I held it, though I'd been bracing for this moment for days. I wanted to believe the paper inside might be wrong, that the lab had made a mistake, that the baby I'd cradled was, despite everything, my son's flesh and blood. But I knew. And when I slit the envelope and unfolded the paper, I saw confirmation in black and white. Alleged father, Maxwell David Hargrove. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock Max had helped his father repair when he was 12. That sound, the steady mechanical rhythm, was all that tethered me to the ground. Max was not the father. My breath caught in my throat. A part of me, a cruel, self-preserving part, had hoped this day would never come. That Victoria, manipulative as she was, had at least told one truth. But she hadn't. She had lied about everything. I poured myself a glass of water, but I didn't drink it. I walked to the nursery, where sunlight filtered softly through the yellow curtains. The room was a lie now. Every lovingly painted wall, every carefully folded onesie, every mobile that hung from the ceiling, deceit disguised as domestic bliss. I sat in the rocking chair, the envelope clutched to my chest. How was I going to tell him? Max had always been soft-hearted. His love was a deep well, and he had drawn from it again and again to pour into Victoria. He'd trusted her, defended her, believed her. And now, this. I thought about keeping it from him, just for a second. But mothers don't raise their sons in lies. We raise them to face storms, even when we want nothing more than to shelter them. The clock struck 5. By 6, I heard the sound of tires on gravel, the familiar crunch of Max's car pulling into the drive. I stood by the window and watched as he stepped out, the infant carrier in one hand, Victoria hovering behind him with her usual glow-on-command smile. She looked up at the house with the look of a queen returning to her castle. She had no idea it was about to fall. I opened the door with a practiced smile. "Welcome home." Max beamed. He slept the whole way. Victoria's eyes locked on mine. Her smile never faltered, but I saw it. The twitch in her brow, the flicker of tension. She knew. Or at least she feared. We stepped into the living room, the winter light long and golden across the hardwood floor. Max placed the carrier down, pulled off his coat, and kissed the baby's forehead. Victoria sat, hands folded in her lap. Every inch of her was bracing. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. Max turned to me. "Sure, Mom. What's up?" I took a breath. The envelope was in my hand. I hadn't let go of it since I opened it. "I had a paternity test done," I said. "Privately, after the baby was born." Max froze. "What?" "I needed to be sure," I continued, stepping closer. Too many things didn't add up. Too many secrets. Victoria stood. "How dare you?" "Sit down," I said, not unkindly. "You'll want to hear this too." Max looked between us, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" I handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, confusion etching into panic. His eyes scanned the document, lips moving silently as he read. Then he looked up. "What is this?" "It means," I said gently, "you're not the baby's biological father." He sat hard on the couch. No, that can't be. That's not," she said. His voice cracked. Victoria moved toward him. "Max, listen. I didn't know what to do. I found out I was pregnant and I panicked. Johnny left and you were there and you loved me." "You told me I was the father," Max said, his voice hollow. "I thought you'd leave if you knew." "So you lied," he snapped. "You built our entire marriage on a lie." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She reached for him, but he recoiled. "I trusted you," he whispered. "God, I loved you." "And I love you," she cried. "You've raised him like your own already. He feels like your son." "But he's not," Max shouted. "And you've been stealing from me. I saw the accounts." Victoria flinched. "You paid him, didn't you?" he asked. "Johnny, to disappear." She nodded, broken. "I wanted a life with you, Max." He shook his head. "You wanted a lie. And you let me build a nursery for a child that isn't mine. You let me name him." The baby stirred, sensing the storm in the room. Max stood abruptly and walked to the nursery. I followed, standing silently in the doorway as he stared at the crib, the walls, the memories already forming around him. "She ruined everything," he said. "No," I said softly. "She tried. But you're still you. You still loved that child. And that means something." He didn't answer. When he turned around, his eyes were different. Harder. "I need time," he said. "I need space." "Then take it," I said. "We'll handle this together." Behind us, Victoria stood in the hall, pale and shaking. And for the first time since she walked into our lives, I saw the truth land in her eyes like a stone. The game was over. 3 days passed like a storm cloud parked over our house. Dark, unmoving, filled with a silent, heavy pressure that made breathing difficult. Max didn't speak, not to me, not to Victoria. He drifted through the house like a man in mourning. He held the baby once or twice, but didn't smile. He sat in the nursery for long hours, eyes fixed on the crib, hands still, shoulders hunched. I'd bring him tea, he wouldn't touch it. I'd ask if he wanted to talk, and he'd only nod or shake his head. He wasn't angry with me. That would have been easier. No, he was shattered. Each hour splintering the life he'd spent years building, the family he thought he had, the child he believed was his. Victoria, meanwhile, moved with false confidence. She tried to reclaim normalcy, folding laundry, wiping counters, humming lullabies too loudly. But it was all brittle. Her hands shook when she passed Max. Her eyes flitted constantly to me, filled with hate barely veiled beneath politeness. She hadn't dared to deny the DNA results, but she hadn't confessed either, not fully. She was waiting, I think, hoping Max's silence meant surrender, hoping he'd let it pass. But Max was waiting for something else. He was waiting for everything. So I gave it to him. It was Saturday morning, cold and gray, the kind of day when the earth itself seems exhausted. Victoria had gone out, another errand. She was always running errands now, likely to call Johnny, maybe even see him. I didn't care. Let her run. Let her stretch the illusion for one last day. I found Max at the kitchen table staring into a half-empty mug. "Can we talk?" I asked. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no. So I placed the thick manila folder on the table and sat across from him. "What's that?" "The rest of it," I said. "Everything I know, everything I've found." He looked at it with caution, like it might explode. "I know it's hard," I said gently, "but you deserve the full truth, not just the test, the whole truth." I opened the folder. One by one, I laid the pieces before him. First, the photographs, Cassie's work, Victoria and Johnny, outside a motel, walking hand in hand through a grocery store on the far side of town, sharing a kiss in a parked car with steamed windows. Grainy, time-stamped, undeniable. Max stared, mouth slightly open, breathing slow and shallow. Next, the financial records. I tapped the spreadsheet I had printed, showing months of ATM withdrawals, wire transfers, and duplicate transactions. "She took over $14,000 from your joint account," I said, "most of it in small withdrawals. It was deposited into a separate account in Johnny's name." His face twitched. Then the scanned agreement, legally binding, notarized. The document where Johnny Reed waived all parental rights in exchange for a lump sum of $25,000. "She paid him to walk away," I said, "to let you believe the baby was yours." Max pressed a hand to his mouth, the paper crinkling under his fingertips. And then the final blow, the DNA report. Maxwell David Hargrove, 0.00% probability of paternity, I read softly. He didn't move. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock behind us. 17 seconds passed before he finally spoke. "I wanted to believe the test was wrong. I know. I thought maybe the lab mixed things up. Maybe you were trying to protect me, even if you didn't have all the facts." I nodded. "I hoped I was wrong too." He leaned back, tears welling in his eyes. "She told me it was mine. The second she found out, she said it. I remember she cried and said, 'Max, we're having a baby.' Like it was ours, like we made it together." "She made you believe it," I said. "That doesn't make it true." He shook his head slowly. "I read books. I stayed up for every craving. I painted the damn nursery. You were a good man. That's not something to be ashamed of. But I wasn't his father." "No," I said. "But you were there. That still matters." Silence again. Then, "She lied to me every single day." "She did," I said. "And she would have kept lying if I hadn't stopped her." He blinked. "You saved me." "No," I said gently. "I told you the truth. You'll save yourself." At that moment, the front door creaked open. Victoria's voice echoed down the hall. "Max, I just ran to get wipes. They had a sale and—" Her voice faltered as she walked into the kitchen. She saw the papers. She saw Max. She knew. "I can explain," she started. "No," Max said. "You can't." She looked at me like I was a snake, like I'd slithered between her walls and poisoned everything she'd built. "You think this is your house now?" she hissed. "He's my husband. That baby is—" "Johnny's," Max interrupted. Her eyes widened. He stood towering over her. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "You lied to me. You stole from me. You let me build a life around a fantasy. I didn't want to lose you, she cried. You're everything I ever wanted. And when Johnny left me, when he said he didn't want the baby, I panicked. You were safe. I wasn't a husband, Max said. I was a landing pad. Tears streamed down her face. Please, Max, don't do this. You've already done it, he said coldly. You packed the parachute, now jump. She gasped. You're kicking me out? You have until tomorrow morning, he said. I'll give you money for a motel, but I want you gone. She looked at me again, eyes blazing. You did this? No, I said. You did. I just turned on the light. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door to the den behind her. Max stood there for a long time, then turned to me. I want to fight, he said, for custody. If I can't be his father, I can at least be the one who protects him from her. I nodded. Then we start tomorrow. There's a moment in every great betrayal when the mask finally slips, and sometimes that moment doesn't come in screams or confessions, but in a courtroom. Stiff-backed chairs, clacking heels, and voices too polite to hold the weight of the wounds they're dissecting. That was how it happened for us. Max wore a navy suit, not new, but clean, pressed, and deliberate. He looked older that day, not aged in years, but matured, stripped of illusion. The Max who used to defer and flinch was gone. In his place sat a man determined to reclaim his life. Victoria entered with dramatic flair, hair curled, a delicate silver necklace, and that performative frailty she wore like a silk shawl. She carried their son, her son now, in her arms, as if to remind the court that she was the one who had borne life and therefore deserved everything. Her lawyer, a smarmy man named Jacob Bristow, rose first, invoking Max's financial records, their shared residence, and the emotional trauma Victoria had suffered. Despite difficulties, he declared, Ms. Hargrove has been a devoted wife and mother. She's simply requesting the continued support of the life she was promised. He called it a marriage built on complex realities. I called it theft. Our attorney, Ms. Greer, stood calmly. She was old school, lean and sharp-eyed with a voice like cut glass. Your Honor, she began, what we have here is not complexity, but deception. A woman who falsified paternity, misappropriated funds, and knowingly entered into a union under fraudulent pretenses. There are receipts, statements, signed waivers. She paid the biological father to disappear and misled her husband into raising another man's child. She laid out the evidence, page after page, photo after photo, the DNA test, the notarized agreement, the bank withdrawals, the visits to the custody lawyer, and then she delivered the final blow. Victoria had not only deceived Max, she had planned to leave him after the baby's birth while continuing to claim financial rights to his estate and family home. She wanted the nursery, Ms. Greer said simply, not the marriage. Victoria's face went pale, then pink, then pale again. I watched Max closely. He didn't cry. He didn't tremble. He sat upright, eyes locked on the judge, letting the weight of the truth rest on his shoulders without collapsing beneath it. The judge, a stern woman named Yvette Langston, leaned forward. Ms. Hargrove, she said to Victoria, do you deny entering into this agreement with Jonathan Reed, stating he was the biological father? Victoria tried to gather herself. I was scared. I was alone. Were you scared when you transferred $8,000 from your husband's account into Mr. Reed's? The judge asked. No answer. Were you scared when you signed a contract absolving him of responsibility and failed to disclose the truth to your husband? Victoria looked down. In light of the evidence, Judge Langston continued, this court finds your claim for spousal support unjustified. Furthermore, your access to any shared marital assets is nullified by your pattern of fraud. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Petitioner is denied alimony. The family home remains the property of Bella Hargrove, protected under premarital inheritance and legal agreement. Temporary visitation with the minor child is granted to the respondent, pending further review. That was it. The gavel fell, and with it, Victoria's fantasy shattered. She didn't cry. Not really. She sat motionless, lips slightly parted, the baby in her lap, her hands white-knuckled around the blanket. When it was over, she stood without a word. No final plea, no dramatic scene, just silence and the sound of her heels echoing down the marble floor. Max and I left together. Outside, the sky was bright and harsh, the sunlight almost unforgiving. Max leaned against the car and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. "It's over," he whispered. I shook my head gently. "It's starting." And it did. He filed for partial custody. The judge granted supervised visits first, then overnight weekends. Victoria didn't fight much. Her performance had been eviscerated by the trial, and her lawyer was now chasing a new scandal elsewhere. Max took it slowly. At first, he just sat with the baby, no longer his in name, but still familiar. He fed him, held him, rocked him through midnight cries. He was grieving something that still lived and breathed. But love, I learned, doesn't need blood to take root. One Sunday morning, I found him asleep in the nursery, the child curled on his chest. His hand rested on the baby's back protectively, like a father who had fought to earn that title, not one who had simply assumed it. I didn't wake them. I just stood in the doorway, watching the light slant through the blinds, illuminating a man and a boy rebuilding a bond that no court ruling could take away. 3 weeks later, Max approached me with blueprints. "I want to give you something," he said. "Not pay you back, just thank you." I opened the folder. A painting studio. He had cleared out the upstairs guest room, installed new windows, and replaced the musty carpet with reclaimed hardwood. "It's yours," he said. "You've spent your life making space for everyone else. Now it's your turn." The first time I walked into it, I cried, not because of the room, but because I realized I'd stopped thinking about myself the day I became a mother, and only now, decades later, was someone asking me to start again. I began to paint. At first, it was slow, rusty. Then the colors returned. My hands remembered. I painted light into shadows. I painted my grief, my joy, my fury, and finally, my peace. Max watched me with awe. "You're incredible," he said one evening as I painted him holding the baby on a swing set. "I can't believe you stopped doing this for us." "I didn't stop," I said. "I just paused, until now." And we smiled. Because for the first time in years, the house was filled with something new. Not tension, not silence, but hope. I never imagined my second act would begin with a crooked paintbrush and a rusty easel in an upstairs room filled with light. But there I was, 67 years old, sleeves rolled up, apron smeared with oils and acrylics, painting like a woman on fire. Max had given me the space, but I had to fill it. The first few days, I simply stared at the blank canvas, at the color wheels I hadn't touched in decades, at the light that filtered through the east window and turned everything gold. And then I began. Clumsily at first, muscles stiff, lines shaky, colors mixed with hesitation rather than intent. But something inside me stirred with every brush stroke. My fingers remembered things I thought I'd lost. And as the colors took shape, so did I. The house, which once echoed with Victoria's condescension, was now filled with scent of linseed oil and soft music. I painted every morning, sometimes until Max would knock softly with a fresh cup of tea. One morning, I painted a woman underwater, eyes wide, dress flowing, screaming, but soundless. Another day, a field of tall red poppies, a single figure standing in the middle with arms raised to the sky. I didn't always know what I was painting until it was finished. That was the beauty of it. The truth would always reveal itself. Then came Gloria. I met her at the farmer's market, of all places, crouched beside a crate of bruised peaches, muttering about men who can't even tell a ripe one from a rock. Thought she had a laugh like gravel and wore a t-shirt that said, "If I'm quiet, I'm plotting." Naturally, we struck up a conversation. She told me about the garden club. "We're weeds, really," she said. "The kind that don't die, just come back stronger every spring. You should join." I did. And what I found was more than a hobby. It was a haven, a circle of women, all over 60, all with stories that carried bruises beneath their sleeves. They had been mothers, wives, caregivers, workers, always bending, giving, sacrificing. And now, they were blooming. They called themselves the Dandelion Circle because dandelions are the most underestimated flowers, called weeds, pulled up, poisoned, but they always return, always survive, and when the wind is right, they spread everywhere. We met in an overgrown section of the senior center's backyard, reclaiming beds of soil that had gone dry and forgotten. With our hands in the earth, the stories began to spill. Gloria, the loudest and toughest, had once cared for a man who never remembered her name by the end and left everything to his daughters from a first marriage who hadn't visited in years. June, whose 4 children called only to borrow, not to check on her. "I raised them all," she said, "but none of them remember who I was before I became their unpaid babysitter." And Irene, soft-spoken, eyes always down, who had quietly sold her home to move in with her son, only to be tucked away in a back room and asked to stay out of sight when company came. Their stories broke something in me and built something new. We didn't pity one another. We recognized one another. One afternoon, after pruning roses in silence, Gloria looked at me and said, "You've got that light in your eye, the kind that says you remembered who you are again." "I've started painting," I told her. She clapped her dirt-covered hands. "Then come teach us." "I'm not a teacher," I said. She smiled. "We're not students either, but we're ready." So it began. We asked the senior center director for a room, and they gave us one, a forgotten storage space on the second floor. The windows were filthy, the floor warped, and the radiator coughed like a dying animal. We scrubbed, painted the walls, swept up spiders, and opened the windows. And slowly, it became ours. Every Thursday, we gathered with canvases and coffee. I brought paints and brushes, old easels I found in yard sales. We didn't focus on realism. We focused on what had been stolen and what we wanted back. "What did they take from you?" I asked the first day, holding up a blank canvas. The room went quiet. Then one by one, they painted. June painted a door with no handle. Gloria painted a field of mouths shouting into silence. Irene painted herself small, too small to open a window that loomed above her. And then they painted what they wanted to reclaim: freedom, joy, voice, dignity. One woman painted herself as a tree, roots wrapped around the graves of everyone who told her she wasn't enough. Another painted a woman dancing in flames. We laughed, we cried, we created, we returned. The group began to grow. Word spread. Women came who had never touched a brush in their lives. They brought stories hidden in scarves and silence. One had been denied an education. Another raised 5 children and was now living in a shared apartment with a stranger. Some came just to sit in the back and watch. All were welcome. Max visited once. He stepped into the room while we were mid-session. Gloria had just finished a canvas of a lion wearing pearls and sunglasses, and he stood there, stunned. "You started a movement," he said. I shrugged. "I started with bruised peaches." He chuckled. "You're amazing, Mom." "No," I said. "I'm finally mine again." And that's what mattered. In a dusty room above a quiet building, we were rebuilding our names. Stroke by stroke, color by color, not waiting to be seen anymore, just seeing ourselves and finding that we were beautiful. Some women leave quietly. Others linger like smoke, clinging to the curtains, the walls, the memories that refuse to fade. Victoria was the second kind. Even after she'd lost the case, even after the house was legally out of reach and her bank account had dried to fumes, she continued circling the edges of our lives like a hawk, watching for weakness. At first, she masked her desperation with civility. Max would get emails with subject lines like, "For the baby," or "Just so you're informed." She sent photos, sweet ones, the boy smiling in a jumper Max had bought, a blurry video of his first steps, a quiet clip of him sleeping with a toy giraffe clutched in his tiny fist. She wanted to remind Max of what he wasn't holding. And he let her. He viewed the photos. He watched the videos. Because despite everything, every lie, every stolen truth, his heart still beat faster at the sound of that child's giggle. "He's still part of me," he told me once, "even if he's not mine." But Victoria couldn't leave it at that. When subtlety didn't get her what she wanted, she tried nostalgia. "I still remember the first time you held him," she wrote one night. "You cried. You said he was your whole world. You meant it, Max. I know you did." Then came the cracks. "The court was unfair. You know it. Your mother poisoned you against me. This could still work." Max never replied. Not once. He kept visitation clean, boundaries firm, tone neutral. But the silence only made her bolder. And then, one Thursday evening, she broke. It started with a single text. "You don't get to win." Max showed it to me with a frown. Then more came. "I changed my mind. You can't see him anymore. There's no law that says I have to let you. You're not the father. You never will be. Unless..." That last word hung there like a snare. No follow-up. Just unless. Max didn't answer. Neither did I. But my chest tightened. Then an email followed the next morning. Longer. Vicious. "You want him so badly? You know how to get him? We could have a fresh start. He could grow up with both of us, or not. Your choice." She was holding the child hostage, and we both knew it. Max was quieter than usual that morning. He paced, checked the court order again, called our lawyer. The existing agreement covered visitation, but left room for reevaluation, which meant Victoria could request a change, especially if she made up claims about his mental state or household stability. "She wants to drag me back into the spiral," Max said. "Use him like bait." "She thinks you'll cave," I said softly. "You've always tried to protect everyone, even her." He stopped pacing. "Not anymore." That evening, Max sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. I brewed tea, silently watching him craft his response. Not rushed, not angry, but precise. Every word was a brick, every line a wall she would not climb again. When he finished, he read it aloud. "Victoria, this ends now. The manipulation, the threats, the weaponization of an innocent child who has no say in the games you insist on playing. I am not his biological father. I know that. You made sure of it. But I have been more of a father to him than the man who disappeared for a paycheck. I held him before you did. I rocked him to sleep when you were exhausted. I stayed up reading medical charts when he had a fever. I taught him to giggle, to grip, to trust. You don't erase that with a text message. I have every receipt, every notarized lie, every financial betrayal. If you follow through on your threat, I will file for emergency review. I will fight for visitation, and I will win. And every single tactic you're using will be documented in court. But more than that, I will never crawl back into the cage you tried to lock me in. So, make your choice. Be his mother, not his warden. Or prepare for war. Maximum." He hit send, not with shaking hands, but with resolve. Victoria didn't respond. Not that night, not the next, but the following weekend, she showed up for the visitation drop-off, hair pulled back, eyes hollow. She didn't say a word, just handed Max the boy, lingered a second longer than necessary, and walked away. I watched her from the window. No anger this time, No gloating, just sadness. Because she knew she'd lost. Not just the legal battle, not even Max, but the last thread of control she had dangled for months. And the child. He giggled when Max kissed his forehead, tucked his face into his neck, and held on tight. He didn't know, didn't need to. Because children always know who loves them without needing DNA to prove it. Later that week, I finished another painting. It was quiet, subtle. A man in a storm, walking toward a distant house where the lights were on. The wind at his back, the road long but his shoulders upright. The house waited like an anchor. I named it Coming Home. Max saw it and smiled. "That me?" he asked. "No," I said. "That's all of us." Because somehow, through betrayal, heartbreak, and war, we had come home. It's strange how healing sneaks in, not with a dramatic flourish, but quietly. Like the way light enters a room you thought was sealed. One day you simply notice that you're breathing easier, that you're not flinching at shadows anymore, that you feel safe. Max was doing better than I dared to hope. The boy who had once cried in my lap over betrayal was now a man sitting at the kitchen table with textbooks open and a focused look in his eyes. He'd enrolled in a business development course at the local college, throwing himself into late-night lectures and weekend workshops with a hunger I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager building model airplanes. He wasn't running from the past anymore. He was running toward something. He spoke often of plans, small consulting projects, nonprofits that needed operational help, even the idea of opening a financial literacy program for teen parents. I watched him slowly stitch a future from the wreckage Victoria had left behind. But even more surprising than his career transformation was the change in his heart. Her name was Claire. He didn't tell me about her right away. I think he was afraid, not of what I'd think, but of jinxing something delicate, something good. When he finally brought her up, it was over tea in the garden. "She runs a senior dog shelter," he said with a shy smile. "She volunteers with displaced women too. You'd like her." "She sounds like a saint," I said. He laughed. "She's sharp, doesn't put up with my nonsense, calls me out when I'm being mopey. I like that." And then, after a pause, "Would you be open to meeting her?" I nearly cried. Not because he'd found someone new, but because he wanted me to be part of it. Because after everything Victoria had tried to do to pull us apart, here he was, inviting me into this new, hopeful chapter of his life. "I'd love to," I said. Claire arrived a week later, holding a modest bouquet of lavender and wildflowers, her smile warm and her eyes steady. She wore a button-down shirt tucked into worn jeans, a tote bag over one shoulder that smelled faintly of cedar and peppermint. She radiated calm. She hugged me, not a hesitant, polite hug, but the kind that says, "I see you, I respect you." Over dinner, she asked thoughtful questions about my art, about the dandelion circle, about how I got into painting again at my age. I watched her talk to Max with an ease that made my heart ache, in a good way. There was no performance, no manipulation, just two people meeting each other in the middle of their honesty. After dinner, as Max was gathering dishes, Claire and I stepped out onto the porch. "I want to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For raising him to feel," she replied. "Men like him? They're rare. He listens. He apologizes. He doesn't just say, 'I love you,' he shows it." I looked at her for a long moment. "He wasn't always like that," I said softly. "Life tried to harden him. He let it hurt him, but he never let it change who he was." She nodded. "He told me about everything, about the baby, the betrayal, you." I suppose that was a test. "No," she said. "That was trust." It landed in my chest like a balm. The following week, I returned to the dandelion circle and told the women everything. About Max, about Claire, about the strange, beautiful way pain had led to purpose. "You should paint it," Gloria said. "Not a woman in pain, but a woman walking out of it." So I did. I started a piece that night. A woman on a mountain path, barefoot, her hands empty, not because she'd lost everything, but because she'd finally let it go. Her hair was loose, her shoulders back, her face turned toward the sun. I called it For Herself. And when I finished, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because it was the first painting I'd ever made that wasn't for someone else's eyes. It wasn't to be understood. It wasn't to be sold. It simply was. It existed because I existed. That spring, Max officially launched his consulting service, small scale, part-time. Claire helped him design his logo. I helped him draft his first pitch deck. He set up a corner of the dining room with a monitor and sticky notes and a whiteboard full of ideas. We were rebuilding together. Victoria still sent the occasional bitter message. But Max didn't flinch. He documented them all, forwarded them to his lawyer, and then deleted them without reading twice. She no longer had access to our piece, and the boy, sweet and growing, continued to visit. He was learning to say Nana. He called Max Dad, though neither of them made a fuss about titles anymore. Love, we'd learned, didn't need naming to be real. One Sunday, after Max and Claire took the boy to the park, I sat alone in my studio. A storm was moving in. The windows rattled slightly, but the light was soft, muted gold through clouds. I opened a new canvas, and before I even touched the brush, I whispered, I am not the old hag. Because that's what she'd called me. That day, that toast, that cruel, careless sentence spoken in my home, at my table. When the old hag moves into a nursing home, her room will become a nursery. That was supposed to be the end of me. Instead, it was the beginning. I dipped the brush into deep red and painted a door. And on the other side, sunlight. Because I had opened that door. Because I had walked through it. Because I no longer lived for anyone else's expectations. Because now, I lived for myself.